It doesn't only follow war zones or disasters. It walks into hospitals, schools, and homes. We don't ask is what still haunts them. Estimated 4% of the global population has experienced PTSD in their life. 40% of US VA healthcare staff were at risk for moral injury.
Fortunately, that plane ran out of fuel midway over the Atlantic. Number one would be to limit exposure as much as possible. To watch it, we become engrossed. It's causing a lot of emotional responses. People, when they're exposed to trauma, they may experience an increase in irritability, arousal, dreams, negative images. And talk to your family and friends about it. Absolutely, don't shy away from that discussion.
We're not just witnessing a mental health crisis, we're living inside it right now. Trauma has become the background noise of modern life, silent, persistent, and often unseen. It doesn't only follow war zones or disasters, it walks into hospitals, schools, and homes every day. And while medals may be pinned and applause given, our frontline heroes, veterans, and especially women often carry invisible wounds that rarely make headlines. What we don't see is what they relieve. What we don't ask is what still haunts them even today. According to WHO, an estimated 4% of the global population has experienced PTSD in their life, despite 70% of people undergoing at least one traumatic event during their lives. Frontline workers face a disproportionate burden. A 2024 meta-analysis found 40% of US VA healthcare staff were at risk for moral injury, 41% for PTSD, and 27% for depression, and 25% further showing signs of persistent burnout. Globally, roughly 1 in 7 first responders now meet criteria for probable PTSD due to routine job-related trauma exposure. These aren't just statistics. They're silent stories of struggle shaped by the socialite pressure, overlooked by broken systems, and too often left without healing they deserve. Welcome to another episode of Khan Klinics. I'm your host, Dr. Amir Khan. And today we're honored to welcome a remarkable leader in the field of trauma recovery and resilience. She's redefining how we understand post-traumatic growth, particularly among frontline workers, veterans, and survivors of adversity. Join me to welcome Dr. Margaret McKinnon. She is a full professor and associate and clinical research in psychiatry and behavioral neurosciences at McMaster University, holding the prestigious Homewood Chair in Mental Health and Trauma. She completed her PhD in psychology at the University of Toronto, followed by a postdoctoral fellowship. She's contributed more than 200 scientific publications, including works currently in press. Dr. McKinnon is a frequent commentator in the media on matters related to PTSD. She's authored more than 180 peer-reviewed articles and has written about PTSD, memory processing, and interventions like goal management training. Dr. McKinnon, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Khan. I'm delighted to be here.
Well, let's start by asking first, why the shift? Why trauma research? And was there any event in particular that swayed you to go in that direction?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. So when I was doing my PhD at the University of Toronto, I was very interested in aging and dementia. But in 2001, I was actually on board a plane that was traveling from Toronto, Ontario to Lisbon, Portugal. And unfortunately, that plane ran out of fuel midway over the Atlantic. Over a 25-minute period, we were prepared for the ditching of that aircraft at sea. That included wearing our life jackets, a countdown to impact with the ocean, wearing our oxygen masks. And very fortunately, through the skill of the pilot, we were able to glide for 25 minutes to a joint military-civilian airstrip in the Azores. We made a very rough landing, which I call a plane crash because it very much was to me. The plane was on fire in the tire wells, and we evacuated the plane down the emergency exits, where we were met by the American military, who actually took care of us when that happened. I have a great deal of gratitude and a debt to the military and to the first responders who assisted us that day. I did develop PTSD after that incident and went on to receive successful treatment, and really wanted to be able to give back to the community, give back to individuals who experienced mental health difficulties. And so I became very interested in the field of trauma and PTSD, including conducting a study among the survivors of the aircraft incident. We both scanned their brains while they recollected the traumatic incident and also looked at their memories of what they recalled from that time.
Sure. Well, sorry to hear that experience. It's obviously something that a lot of people out there, especially we talk about the people who is coming from war zones and experiencing stuff like that. There's a huge transition from this traumatic experience, and sometimes it takes ages and time. But a lot of times we forget those who are actually witnessing these sort of traumatic experiences, and they get embroiled into it. And a classic example is a person, a colleague of mine, who's just watching these wars and pictures on social media, and she herself started having dreams about these traumatic events. What advice would you give to people who are, first of all, outsiders? We're talking about those who would get themselves embroiled, and then they're supposed to be impartially, quote unquote, to say, to observe these experiences, and they're not able to do that.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. We certainly recognize in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Health Disorders essentially what is vicarious traumatization. So not only do you need to experience a trauma yourself where your life is at threat, but you may also witness or hear about someone else experiencing that trauma. And that is known to give rise to symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. Our advice in those circumstances is multifold. Number one would be to limit exposure as much as possible, to take breaks, so not to take on all that information all at once, to only, be responsible for reviewing the information that you must review and not taking on more. And that can be very difficult because, we watch it, we become engrossed. It's causing a lot of emotional responses, and sometimes it's difficult to actually turn away. And I completely understand that. It can be difficult, but being mindful of that and thinking, this is what I need to do today. I don't need to do more. I'm going to take breaks. I'm going to limit my exposure can be very helpful. The other thing would be not to push those emotions down, but rather to acknowledge them and recognize that that is a normal response to being exposed to trauma. For the majority of people, when they're exposed to trauma, they may experience an increase in irritability, arousal, dreams, negative images. But typically those responses will resolve over time. To remember that these are normal reactions and that we do not expect them to persist over time. If they do, it's very important to seek assistance from a mental health provider, from your family physician, or from others who can support you through that. And talk to your family and friends about it. Absolutely. Don't shy away from that discussion.
So we see that a lot of times the younger community is being especially vulnerable. They're not able to cope with stress, and sometimes they would take everything to a heightened experience. Sometimes they want to experience that experience at that moment. And B, they feel at times that it's a new, invigorating motion, not knowing what's on the other side of the hill. And on the other side, there may be catastrophic consequences. So the question really is, if we are exposed to these new experiences and or stresses, what would you say would be important, or a message you'd like to give out to our audience listening to this feeling or moment at a time which could lead to a traumatic experience afterwards? When would you say, oh, these are red flags and we've got to be careful?
Yeah, and I think that's a very important question because, we're in a time of increased global insecurity. We're at a time of famine and war. And these images really, we experience empathy and care for others who are experiencing traumatic losses or undergoing trauma. I think though we have a responsibility to be aware and to support as best we can, we also need to care for ourselves in these circumstances as well. It is okay to take a break from this. It is okay to experience joy at times when there's deep sorrow. And really giving yourself again permission to walk away at times from things that are happening, because that's important. To be aware that a lot of the responses that you're having again are normal. It's normal to feel tremendous empathy for people who are suffering. It's normal to feel very disturbed by images that we're seeing. If these symptoms persist, where you're finding you're having repeated nightmares, it's interfering with your difficulties, or interfering with your ability to interact with your family, to perform your work, to engage in social activities, then it's important to seek out help and assistance, right? So if we know when there's an interfering effect, we really want to be looking for supports. And those supports can be family and friends.
So you're saying reaching out is very, very important, realizing that this has gone beyond a certain phase, and then and speaking to your friends and your peers and group, trying to be vocal about it, is important. And don't try to keep it inside. Don't try to say you're going to cope it, try to cope it yourself. What a remarkable journey we've just experienced together. The path to health isn't always straight, but it's always worth the effort. I hope today's conversation inspired you to take the next step in your wellness journey, armed with new knowledge and a fresh perspective. If today's episode left you inspired, share it with someone who need to hear this. Give us a thumbs up and your opinion. Keep exploring, keep evolving, and we'll see you in the next episode of Khan Klinics.